Interestingly, I also did a chronological record. Now, if you take the clinical guidelines, you take the values you entered there and you present them according to date, right, with an extra field with free text, just for patient coming in and saying, I felt much better the last week, is something you want to write in the free text. Then this is a minimum number of fields that you can edit here directly if you want to. So these are entry fields, right? You can edit them here directly, and it includes everything you filled in any of the guidelines for today. Interestingly, it's almost impossible to see the difference between this and a classical healthcare record, because this is what you have today. But this is all you have today. So it comes back to this, what I said in the beginning, of a state and change records. The file, the source file, and the changes to the source file. This is the change record. And it is very easy to produce this from the guidelines. What is almost impossible, however, is to produce the guideline state from this one. Which also goes to show why it's so hopeless to extract decent information from current records, because you only have that. Anyway, I'm doing this as open source, because if I try to go out and sell this, everybody says, nah, I don't want this. And now everybody is interested because it's for free. Right? But I think this is going to be something anyway. And the whole idea here, the only standard I'm trying to impose is the files themselves. So if you have a guideline, you design the guideline for a particular hospital, that one can be used in another one too. So you have it by region and so forth. You can make your own guideline. And when you open up a guideline, you can also add and detract lines, and it stays with that patient.
So what happens when the guidelines change?
Yeah, the idea then is, first of all, somebody is working for us now also to make an editor for the guidelines. And that's an editor which will look very much like this, which is intended for doctors, professors to do for their region. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, every guideline has a back pointer to the origin, because you have inheritance. You can take guideline, modify it. It becomes a child of the guideline. If any parent is modified, first of all, that comes back to when do you need to get the message about it. I don't want the message in the middle of the day that the patient now saw last week has a change in the guideline. Unless it's a disaster, I don't want to know about it. Those disasters are very few. But the next time I see the patient, this opens up. The first thing this does is go check its parent to see, has anything changed? If it has, then it pops up and says, hey, there's been a change in your parent, whatever. For instance, the first choice in medication has changed. Or we don't give that anymore because something terrible happens, grows hair out of their ears or something. Then you get that warning when you open up the guideline, and then you get the choice, do you want to change your guideline or not? Now we cut off 15 years, probably, from this 17 years, in one little swoop. We have, so I think that reduces, can easily reduce that period without introducing another work moment for the doctor. He doesn't have to go and look something up. It's there, it's what he's working with. Something else that's interesting is confidentiality. If you look at current records, when you have all these determinations about, but anything the psychiatrist says shouldn't be read by anyone but psychiatrist and whoever, which is actually also a false requirement. Why? Because that's not what the patient normally wants. He wants nobody knows he has psychosis or schizophrenia or depression or whatever. That's what he wants to say. But since the only thing that exists in the records is who examined the patient, not what he was examined for, because it doesn't exist, the requirement is now that anything the psychiatrist says should not be read by anyone. It's a false requirement, because that's nobody cares about that. They care about the psychiatric problem, right? Which means that if the psychiatrist today treats you for a cold, it's highly secret, because it was a psychiatrist that actually gave you these aspirins. If a general practitioner writes a recipe for your antidepressant medicine, it's all of a sudden not secret anymore because it was a general practitioner that wrote the recipe. That's stupid. Like it is in Sweden. In Sweden, there's actually a law that says that confidentiality border goes across ownership of the care institution, which is totally out of the blue. I mean, and if you look at our system we have in Uppsala, at least, to the left, a full third of the screen is occupied by the whole organization of the county. This is the hospital, those are the private people, and these are the... It's there all the time. I don't care who bought who. Why do I need some kind of industrial telephone directory on my screen all the time? That's what I get. And this is interesting, I see the whole record, but now the GP emergency department, that's 2 places in Uppsala, got bought by a private Carema or whatever, private company. All of a sudden I don't see the records, and I see them in another place. I have to go and look for them specifically. I can't see them together with the rest. Why? Because it's another owner. What do I care who owns it? I want to know what's wrong with the patient. That's the Swedish law. It's totally stupid. But if you have this system, forget about who did it. You can put your confidentiality on the problem, on the issue, right? If there's a schizophrenia or depression here, you can say this is only allowed for those. And suddenly you have the right concept, because that is the concept that you need confidentiality for. An example, urology. You go to a urologist with your syphilis. So you say, anything the urologist says about me, nobody can read. You go to the same urologist for your kidney stones. All of a sudden, that's as secret as everything else. That's dangerous, because kidney stones should not be secret. Others should know that you have it. But you can't, because if you do that, they know that you had syphilis, and you don't want that. This shows that you're actually using the wrong concept for your confidentiality. It's not the speciality that counts, it's the disease. But again, the disease does not exist in the system, so here it does. That's one. Interestingly, it also means, but we come to that in contraindications, and I told you about this interaction contraindications. If in this system you prescribe a medication that should not be given to someone with hypertension, the system will tell you this guy has hypertension. It's a contraindication. You solve that problem too. And this is actually pretty easy. So if you look at the structure of the ICD-10 coding, you will see it goes from general to specific. So at the highest level, E, the E codes is endocrinological disorders. Right? E10 to 14 is diabetes. E10 is diabetes type 1, I think. I forget. Right? Anyway, so the more digits you have, the more specific it gets. Which means if you use it for contraindications, you can say you have headache here, for instance. It's a range of ICD-10 codes. The system can tell you, look, don't give this medication, because if the patient happens to have migraine, which is a specialized form of the issue you have, headache, it's a problem. Which leads the doctor to say, okay, so either I can tell him I know it's not migraine, but then the system says, well, you know, eliminate it then in the differential diagnosis. So it pushes you to make a better diagnosis. Or tell me what kind of headache he has. Oh, it's Horton's. Eh? It's another type of headache, or it's stress headache. So you are pushed in the direction of more specific diagnosis to avoid the warnings. It's not like today with these warnings we get, we're pushed to just click the mouse and swear silently. Eh? But you actually improve it. As long as the more you specify and follow the guideline, the less stupid warnings you will get, which is a movement in the right direction. So it can do contraindications. Not only that, yeah.
Is medication, the complete list of medication available to all?
Yes. That's one of the things we actually do have already.
Then we have the problem that certain medications are only for certain diseases. And if I, as a patient, say, I don't want these doctors to know that I have the disease, but then he sees there is a back door.
It's a back door, but not here. Because what you have in current systems is that the medications, prescriptions you have, hang off the patient. There is no disease to hang them off. So the only thing you see in the current system, and it's a big problem, is that this patient has all these medications. Okay. If a certain medication is for a certain disease, you can draw the conclusion, that's his problem, because there is no other way to do it. But a lot of medications, like beta blockers, for instance, can be given for hypertension, can be given for migraine, can be given for nervousness, can be given for a few other things, I forgot. Which means that somebody with beta blockers, if you look at the medication list, you don't know what they have. And if you look at electronic healthcare records, this is another part for a study perhaps, is that patients on beta blockers will always get them for life. Nobody will ever stop them because you don't know why they got them. And if the patient has forgotten, he will keep taking them until he has a reason not to take them anymore. And you see a lot of old people in old people's home, almost all of them have beta blockers one way or the other. And nobody dares touch them because something is going to happen if you remove them, you don't know what. And that's typical medications where multiple indications exist. In this system, every medication hangs off its issue. So it's totally clear why it's given, because it belongs to that issue. It could belong to several issues, of course, but it belongs to one. You can give it for more than one disease. Now, if the issue has confidentiality, it means that the medication hanging off it also has confidentiality, so you won't see it. But since the system knows what diseases you have, it can still warn you for both interactions and contraindications, even though you don't see why.